So I titled today's discussion, Juneteenth is a big day around here. And I'd like to, I'll share with you where I got that from a little bit later in the talk. Okay, so June 19th, 1865 is commemorated as the day the last enslaved African Americans were freed in the state of Texas in the United States. We're celebrating beyond Texas borders now. So the emancipation celebration that comes out of June 19th, 1865 is often looking at this is the last, or seeing it as the last day the last enslaved African Americans were freed in the United States. June 19th was for a while remembered as Emancipation Day, but Juneteenth, it became known as Juneteenth. And I think we all understand that's a mashup of June and 19th. It is considered the oldest nationally celebrated observance of the ending of chattel slavery in the United States. Although Abraham Lincoln's administration had issued the Emancipation Proclamation, which took effect on January 1st, 1863, declaring that enslaved people in Confederate states were forever free, and that Confederate General Robert E. Lee surrendered to Union General Ulysses S. Grant on April 9th, 1865. And although the 13th Amendment was actually ratified on December 6th, 1865, rebel soldiers in Texas continued the fighting well into the spring of 1865. So they actually won the last Civil War battle on Texas soil on May 13th, 1865. And that was the Battle of Palmetto Ranch near Brownsville. Some African Americans likely had heard rumors about freedom through Galveston, Texas, if they were in Galveston, Texas, if they were in other parts of Texas. But following General Kirby Smith, the commander of the Confederate Army of Trans-Mississippi, following his surrender in the face of large-scale desertions, General Gordon Granger, it is said, rode into Galveston, Texas on June 19th, 1863 to issue his Special Order Number 3, which declared enslaved African Americans in Texas free and set out guidelines that said they were equal socially, they were equal politically. They should be paid for their work. I don't know if it said socially, but politically and economically, they should be paid for their work. The news of emancipation and the celebrations, Juneteenth celebrations, spread all across Texas and beyond. In Texas, Juneteenth was initially celebrated in churches, and then it eventually moved into public spaces. In fact, there is a new book out by Annette Gordon Reed. It's called Juneteenth. It's a slim book and a really, really interesting read. And she talks about 4 men who bought land in Houston, Texas, that was specifically set aside for the celebration of Juneteenth. It became known as the Emancipation Park, and Juneteenth was celebrated there is celebrated there to this day. It was the land was a segregated park for a while, that served the Black community, but this is a public space that is known, that is associated with the celebration of Juneteenth. And then one theory is that Juneteenth initially spread beyond Texas as African Americans migrated north, migrated west on the Great Migration beginning around the time of World War I. I found that there are specific themes that people engage when they're celebrating Juneteenth. So I had a few pictures, the Emancipation Proclamation, Robert E. Lee's surrender to General Sherman at Appomattox Courthouse, Virginia. This is what General Gordon Granger looks like, and this is one of the books that I put on my Juneteenth syllabus. Interesting book. This is a picture of a Texas Juneteenth celebration in the year 1900 that I found in What is Juneteenth by Henry Louis Gates. And these are the themes that I have found that people outside of Texas engage around Juneteenth celebrations. So there are themes around liberation, right? And often what people say is that Juneteenth is celebrated as a precursor to July 4th, but also this focus on freedom, on liberation, on the United States getting toward fulfilling the fullness of its ideals. Togetherness is another theme that I found. Togetherness was a central theme in Annette Gordon Reed's work. And Dr. Gordon Reed discussed Juneteenth as like a family reunion. And a lot of us know how important family reunions are in the Black community. She also reflected on how with the food waste, food is another a theme around Juneteenth. Say, for instance, all-night barbecues. A lot of people talk about all-night barbecues. Annette Gordon Reed talked about goat being a popular dish that people barbecued in Texas, even though her family didn't do it. But a colleague of mine, S.D. Nina Dillard, talks about how her family, for as long as she could remember and beyond, get together on Juneteenth in Macon, Georgia, and they barbecue a whole pig, and that takes all night. Annette Gordon Reed talks about how, in hindsight as an adult, she really found that this time together, cooking, preparing very labor-intensive or time-intensive foods is actually time spent with family. That was fleeting. A lot of the people have passed away now. Black achievement is another theme for Juneteenth. I just recently saw where a man in Chicago gives tours of famous, and notable or not so famous sites that you should know in terms of Black history. And a lot of the sites that he's showing, like chess records and things like that, are centered on Black achievement. Black creativity is another theme. And this particular theme came out in an oral history that I was able to look at. And the oral history was conducted by Jasmine C. Howard. She's a doctoral student at Michigan State College. And her discussion is with Mr. I.D. Henderson. And he gives a talk about how Juneteenth was celebrated in his community. And he talked about music and how central music was. So that's one expression of creativity. And another expression of creativity is dance that he discussed. And I'm not sure, let's see. If I open this, can you see my screen with Mr. Henderson on it? No? Okay, I have to stop share and reshare. Make sure I share my sound. Oh, it was already done.
So, how did y'all celebrate Juneteenth?
How did we celebrate?
Yeah. As a kid, what are your memories of Juneteenth?
Well, Juneteenth is a big day around here. Every community got some eating going on. Mm-hmm. You got the music, and shoot, I was a youngster. I'd go from here, go from Keltis to Lufkin Land, mm-hmm. Everywhere else told me, get me some red soda water, taste their meat. Eat much I could eat.
So that is a bit of his interview. You hear him talking about the music, and you will hear him talking about the foodways. So red soda water is a big one, or as some people say, red drink. Red beans and rice, red velvet cake, and Does anybody remember or know what red symbolizes with Juneteenth, those red foods? I know it was on the Mixed Spaces website. Does anybody remember? Put it in the chat if you remember. Put it in the chat. Let's see who remembers. Okay. And the legacy of enslavement is also a common theme. And people use Juneteenth to talk about the legacy of and reflect on the legacy of enslavement. Annette Gordon Reed talked about one of the legacies of enslavement being racial hierarchies, the racial caste system, some people would call it. And that is a really, really important space, I think, for us to revisit at Juneteenth and talk about in terms of the legacy of chattel enslavement. And so because one of the main themes is liberation and freedom, I'd love to know in the chat what freedom means to you. What does freedom mean to you? And if you celebrate Juneteenth, what themes do you focus on, or what themes does your community or family focus on? Do they focus on liberation? Do they focus on Black achievement? Do they focus on multiculturalism, coming together? One thing Annette Gordon Reed pointed out was in her family, they didn't just eat the barbecue and have the red soda water, which she said she couldn't have soda when she was little. She just binged on soda during Juneteenth. But she also talked about having hot tamales in her family. And she expressed that this was an interesting, very Texas way of engaging foodways on Juneteenth, because it really connected with the Native American Indian foodways that were carried through by Mexicans and Mexican Americans. And for me, I always teach in my classes that the roots of American culture come from at least 3 places: Africa, Europe, and Native America. And having that barbecue, the red velvet cake, and even hot tamales really symbolizes how Juneteenth it reflects the roots of American culture, the deepest roots of American culture, and can really be a time for us to come together. I'd also love to know what you would put on your Juneteenth playlist. I ended with, I think I ended with